videos. The first video I'm going to show you review image adjustments, filters, layer blending modes, and adjustment layers. And then in the second video I'm going to show you how you can combine using the selection tools with some of those color adjustment and filters. So image adjustments, if you go up to the menu bar at the top, image adjustments, the ones that I was showing in class were desaturate, posterize, invert, hue saturation, levels. I'm going to start up here at the top with levels. Levels, you're looking at what's called a histogram, and if you push the black square in, it's going to darken your blacks, and if you push the white square in, it's going to lighten your whites. Typically when you set this up, you'll sometimes have a bit of a mountain, and you want to move those squares in towards the base of the mountain when you're adjusting or correcting a photo. I go up to image adjustments, and down here desaturate. This will make it black and white. Control Z or Command Z will step back any of these changes. Image adjustments. This is posterize, where you can play with the levels here. You can increase the number of levels or go down with the levels. Control Z to undo that. Image adjustments. Here is invert, which flips your colors and also flips your values. Control Z. And then the one that you'll probably use quite a bit of is this image adjustments hue saturation, where you can play with the hue. You can push the saturation, and you can also go in and colorize, and that will turn it all one color here. Control Z. And then the last thing is image adjustments and color balance, where you can push the reds. That pushes reds and highlights, or I can go to shadows, pushes the reds in shadows, or if you go in the other direction, it's cyan, pushing the greens in the shadows, or going the other direction, magenta, or pushing the blues in the other direction towards yellow. That gives it kind of a look like an Instagram filter, some kind was put on top of it. All right, so those are image adjustments. Again, the one we're going to be using quite a bit here probably is hue saturation. The next menu to show you is filter, and there's a bunch of different options in here. There's things like blur, so I could try a radial blur. And some of these can take a little bit of time to load, so you have to be patient with that, but you can see what effect the radial blur had. And I can increase it or decrease it. I'm just going to say OK on that and then close it. Again, it can take a little bit of time to let that one set in there. Here we go, quite a bit of spin on that. Filter, distort. So things like, we could try a ripple, see what that does. It looks like a watery kind of effect to it. Command Z. Filter, you can add noise, pixelate. I ended up using the halftone one later on for another demonstration. Creates these like dots that it's made out of. Control Z. Filter, pixelate, there's crystallize. Let's see what that does. Filter, these are interesting down here too. Mosaic, pointillize. The best thing is really just try out the filters and see what they do. Stylize, here's solarize, kind of an interesting effect on it. Command Z, filter, stylize, oil paint. And if I push this up a little bit, you'll see the effect a little more. Again, because it's web-based, sometimes it takes a little bit more time to have these sliders work. There you go. Now you can really start to see it. And if I zoom in, I'll say OK to that. See, it gives it this kind of painted look to it. All right, I'm actually going to leave it on that particular setting. The next thing I'd like you to see is the down here. This is the adjustment layers. And the one I was really showing was the gradient map. So if you go to gradient map, okay, it looks like what it does is it applies this layer over top. So this is the gradient map layer, which I can view or hide. And then if I want to change, right now it's just black and white. If I want to change that, double click on this gradient and I can click on these little swatches and I'll just say OK. Go to here, I can pick different gradient. I can even click inside of it too, and then I can add, like I can introduce a new color to it, which I can then slide around and adjust these, and you'll see how it ends up changing the gradient there. So let's say I kind of like that look. I'm going to say OK. And again, remember, this is just a layer that's sitting over top of the other one. So if I want to combine the two layers together, I'm going to hold Shift and then go up to Layer and then merge the layers, which brings it into one. But just notice that the layer itself, you can see the bounding box goes all the way around the outside here. So if I want it to just be focused on the one layer, I could use the selection tool again, hold Shift, select the inverse, and then delete. And now it's just down to deselect. Now it's just down to this one box again. It's made it a little bit smaller. All right, and then the last thing to show are the layer blending modes. So right now you can see this. This is a normal layer. So if I want to play around with this, it's good often to add another layer on top of it. So there's a couple different ways to do this. I could either duplicate this layer, so I could go Layer, Duplicate the Layer, and then I could play around with this and see what happens, like if I make a change to this layer. So I'll take this layer, I'm going to go up to Filter, I'm going to Pixelate, and I'm going to do Color Halftone, and I'm going to bump this up a bit, get some dots there. I'm going to say OK, and then you'll be able to see this if I go like down to normal and then overlay. You can see how it imposes those dots over top of it. All right, that's the underneath layer, and then with this blending mode over top. And you're going to get different results. So if I go to like exclusion, I have a totally different look to it. Here's difference. Sometimes you don't see an effect. Subtract. Hue. That's got a totally different, like, gives it this whole texture to it. Actually, I really kind of like that. I'm going to save this real quick. And another option to try is, so I'm going to get rid of that, just hide that layer for now. If I make a new layer, and then I can just drop a color into this one. So actually, I'm going to just make a little selection area over top of this. Holding Shift to keep it proportional. And then in that, I'm on a new layer. I'm going to go to Edit, Fill, and I'm going to find a color. So if I use the foreground color, that's the color that's down here in my color swatches. I could go to Custom, and then I'm going to pick a color. I'll try green, see what happens. I'll say OK. And so what it is that there's just deselect, select, deselect. There's just this layer sitting over top of it, right? So I can move that around. It's just a layer over top of the other one. I can go to these blending modes and I can see what happens. You know, what happens when I go with darken, throwing that over top, multiply, color burn, darker color, linear burn. And you see you get different kinds of like effects with different blending modes. It really just mixes it in. Now you can also, if I go with this difference, I could even lower the opacity and it'll change it a little bit, kind of what the effect is over top. So let's say I like something like this, okay? And I want to combine everything together now. So what I could do, I'm just going to move this one down here. I take my two layers and I go to Layer, merge the layers, and now they're one layer, okay? And I could reduce that and fit that in as one of my four squares. And that's it for that. The second video, I'll be talking a little bit about how you can make selections and then play around with areas individually or different parts of the image.